wellness and balanced vibrations to everybody. I hope you're having a great day. Despite all the madness in the world, I hope you're finding your own balance and, finding ways to satisfy the mind, body, and soul, and not get swept up in the storm, so to speak. There is serenity in chaos. Seek ye the eye of the hurricane, is a proverb of the Discordian religion. So anyway, all right, to start today, basically, the title is Who is Lucifer? All right, and yeah, that's the title that I made. And so I'm watching, Immanuel Velikovsky and learning a lot about his theories. And, the electric universe is something that I've mentioned throughout kind of my videos. So basically, all right, here we go. So I'm learning about Immanuel Velikovsky, who is a Russian psychiatrist who basically kind of inspired the guys who make up the electric universe theory and the electric universe community, to follow their life paths and get to where they are now. And now the electric universe is basically this, entirely rational and coherent alternative interpretation of the things we're observing in the heavens. From deep space, even within our own solar system, with the activity of comets, and basically their main proposition in contravention to the standard model of cosmology is basically the standard model of space right now is that space is a vacuum. Okay, it's totally empty. There's nothing out there, and the only existence is within each planetary sphere, or each, the sphere of each heavenly body. Relativity basically supposes that all of them are existing in their own separate spheres, and they experience time, and space differently, basically according to their own relative motion. But the electric universe guys basically suppose that the vacuum of space is not actually a vacuum at all. It's actually filled with the fifth, classical element of ether, that it's kind of a plasma, and there's streams of energy flowing throughout this ether, and it's connecting all of the stars, kind of, and again, as above, so below is kind of the ancient principle of philosophy, that basically what's out there, what's in the big scale is usually the same process as the very small scale, and it's just a matter of perception. And so basically, Velikovsky, he supposed that the solar system has not been very calm and pacific as we have supposed it. The idea of the solar system is the accretion disk, that basically we were in this nebula, and the sun was in the center, and basically all of the material accreted in a disk around the sun, and it separated into different strata, into different belts, different density of materials, and those became the planets, and they formed in the exact orbits that they're in now, billions of years of just total peace moving in their existing orbits. And that's really problematic, because the distribution of materials is not in any way rational, or what you might expect, according to just simple gravitational distribution of elements, by a gravitational spinning disk. And there's planets they're spinning at different angles, and sometimes even in slightly different directions. Okay, so they're not at all on the same page. It's almost like, the solar system is like a family of just adopted children, and they it's like we're looking around. It's like there's like a Kenyan black kid, and there's like an Asian kid, and there's like a white kid, and it's like modern science is telling us, like, from the parental point of view, like, yeah, no, we gave birth to all of you, and you're all part of our family, and you've always been. It's like, but the kids look around and they're like, no, we're actually pretty different. I think we came from different families originally. Not to say that that's an insurmountable problem, but there's profound differences that exist even within similar structures on this planet. And, this right now, racism is this huge conflict. Obviously, we haven't gotten over it. So, it's interesting to consider the idea that the planet has gone through catastrophes, and that the people who have lived on this planet experienced it, and they remember it, and they recorded it in the only way they knew how, which was mythology. Okay, this was the great story of the planet, was the story of the gods, and the gods throughout all the cultures across the world correlate to the different planets and moons and different bodies that they were witnessing in heavens. and we treat that as, just this meaningless daytime drama. This crayon book that the ancients, just dedicated thousands upon thousands of man hours, recording the stars and all these movements, just as a hobby, just as a casual obsession. So Immanuel Velikovsky, Russian psychiatrist, all of conventional science today, makes fun of him. But he captured a lot of attention, and even though mainstream science denied it, like they do a lot of things, even back in the 50s and the 60s, it was very popular on college campuses at the time. And David Talbot, and what's his name, Wal Thornhill, who are basically the two kind of main guys of the electric universe, they were two of the college students or young guys who basically heard Velikovsky and like, wow, this is a crazy theory. Like, this totally piques my interest, and they went and ran with it. Okay, so yeah, Immanuel Velikovsky, lots of cool stuff on him on YouTube here. The Bonds of the Past, a documentary. And again, here's some of the Thunderbolts, symbols of an alien sky. They go in and they break down all these symbols of rock art and hieroglyphics all over the world. Yeah, and they basically show how all of the cultures around the world are kind of like using these same symbols, these archetypal symbols, to convey a story that they all experienced, which was a catastrophe of the planet. And I thought this chick down here had a really good comment. Conventional science rejected Velikovsky for the same reason they rejected Nikola Tesla. These men were onto something. They found the truth. Their discoveries were going to shatter the whole system that we have here in place. It's a prison system that enslaves us, and we are the willing slaves without even knowing it. For those who use their own mind instead of blindly eating up what they're being spoon-fed, do not reject Velikovsky. Yeah, cheers to that, Karina. And so I just wanted to do a quick recap of this because I think this is just a story, like, while we're focusing on all this bullshit, the plebeians are fed this daytime drama, of pro-Trump and against Trump and all these. Again, it's devolving into the same old meaningless democratic shenanigans, and I don't mean that just in terms of the Democratic Party, but just democracy in general. Instead of focusing on the real questions and people's actually productive endeavors, they're focused on all this drama. But I think this is really key to the story that's going on this planet, and that's why I choose to focus on it. Get everybody's heads out of their asses as much as possible. Don't mean that in a disparaging way, but seriously, guys, look around. Anyway, moving on. Sherlock Holmes. How often have I said to you that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth? All right, and that is a very good thing to remember. Even though this is far outside of our understanding right now, that doesn't mean that it didn't happen in the past. And if you actually read the words of our ancestors, and if you actually look at the story they were trying to communicate, they were telling you that this has not been some smooth ride, that there's been a lot of catastrophes, and we've been through the fire before, Mr. Reed. And so basically, yeah, that whatever, once you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And the truth is that most of the gravitational, default standard model, associated with general and special relativity is completely inadequate. It's obsolete. It doesn't explain virtually any of the phenomena we're observing in the heavens, especially as our observational capacity gets greater, our telescopes get more sophisticated. The anomalies are just like, it's like, I don't even know how many hundreds of pages you could list all the anomalies and unexpected things that astronomers are finding. And if everything's unexpected, then your theory sucks, because your theory should have an explanation, and these electric universe guys do. And, they'll make fun of, and you'll read some stupid Vice article talking shit, and calling it a hipster fad. But no, there's a lot here going on. And so to start it off, the ancient Semitic religion, this is basically the proto-Judaism, the proto-Abrahamic faiths, okay? Encompasses the polytheistic religions of the Semitic peoples, became they say possibly transition into Abrahamic monotheism by way of the god El, and whose name El is a word for God. And if you watch my last video, the return of Saturn, the birth of God, I talk basically about the definition of the ancient word El, which means God in the original Semitic, is Saturn. Okay, Saturn is like El is a planet, and so this is like again El, or written Aleph Lamd. It's one of these ancient characters, and it means God. okay? And it means Saturn. L is Saturn. And so it's weird, you know, again, there's atheists and religious people like bickering back and forth to the end of freaking time about the existence of God or the non-existence of God. How many people know that the definition of God is Saturn, okay? Like, their whole religion is, you know, a testament to Saturn. And basically, there's a video basically that shows Muslims at Mecca, at the Kaaba, and it just kind of shows that basically a lot of the religions today are kind of a lot of their practices, it's pretty clear, are imitating aspects of Saturn. And here's one from Understanding. This is Savan Bomar. He's if I'm a Jedi Knight, he's my Jedi Master. That cat's on point. I highly recommend his channel. All right. So you saw in that video in Islam how they're rotating around the Kaaba. All right, and it's very much looks like the top of Saturn. It looks like, you know, them worshiping the Kaaba. So if L is Saturn, you know, who is Lucifer that supposedly rebelled against him? Lucifer basically is the light shining one, the light bearer, the morning star, the evening star, the bringer of dawn, or the planet Venus. Okay, so Lucifer, you know, basically, again, people argue back and forth about God, about the devil, but nobody looks up the definition of the words. That originally Lucifer was the planet Venus, and that's kind of like an irrelevant detail in most people's kind of theology. They just kind of ignore that. But yeah, so Lucifer is Venus. So what happened for Venus to kind of fall out of line in the heavens with L, who was Saturn? Okay, this is kind of like the question that we're looking at. So the flood myth, basically all over the world, you have these similar flood deluge myth. Usually sent by a deity, usually affiliated with the heavens, destroys civilization, act of divine retribution. And basically, parallels are often drawn between the floodwaters of these myths and the primeval waters found in certain creation myths. You know, in the electric universe, the primeval waters was kind of the plasma sheath that was surrounding Saturn. Okay, excuse me. And so basically we were surrounded by the primeval waters. There was probably, they saying, kind of there was a layer of heaven, a layer of water in the sky, kind of, you know, in between us and the first great god Saturn. All right, which, just to recap some of the different names of Saturn. Okay, Saturn is in Egypt Atum, right, the first god. Moloch, El, okay, we covered that. Shamash in Babylon, the wheel of Shamash is the wheel of Saturn. Two that we now ascribe to our current sun, Sol and Helios, actually were first ascribed to Saturn. Kronos in Greek is Saturn. The best sun, the first sun, and in the Egyptian coffin was written, "The great God lives, fixed in the middle of the sky." And so to summarize what basically my theory, you know, looking at this through the lens of the electric universe, what it appears, and again, this is what they're saying too, but I'm just trying to, you know, break it down for myself and for you guys, because this is the story of our entire planet. This is the story of every story, right? So the Saturn was a brown dwarf star, and it basically was outside of the solar system, and was glowing much brighter, flying through the ether on its own. It was positively charged, and let me get a picture of Saturn just to have that. So Saturn, under this theory, was basically a brown dwarf star, and Earth was a moon of Saturn. And Saturn was flying throughout the solar system, and flying on its own throughout space. Saturn was positively charged, and surrounding it was a negatively charged plasma sheath, which is essentially what the sun is right now. It's basically a positive anode that's emitting protons, and it's surrounded by a plasma sheath that's negatively charged, and basically is it's like an atom, right? In an atom, you have the proton and the neutron. You have the mass at the center, and then you have the electrons swirling around. So again, as above, so below. So Saturn was its own proton, if you will, its own star flowing throughout space, and Earth was its moon, along with Mars. And that's why Saturn, Earth, and Mars all have very similar axial tilt. They're not the same, but again, under this theory, when Saturn was captured by the solar system, it went through, it kind of jimmied everything and shook everything a little bit out of place. And, that's kind of, again, we're like an adopted family in the solar system with all these planets which have totally different characteristics. They're tilted on all these different ways. If the Earth was created as part of an accretion disk and all the planets were created together as an accretion disk, then they would all look the same as far as their axial tilt and things like that. But again, it's like a black kid, an Asian kid, and a white kid, and their parents are telling them, "Yep, you're all our kids. We had you. You're genetically ours." And that's what the standard model is saying with the accretion disk. But it's like the kids are looking around. It's like, okay, mom, okay, dad, but something's clearly going on. We're from different places, and that's how it is with the planets. Like Saturn, Earth, and Mars all kind of like are part of their own step family within the solar family. All right. So that's Saturn, and when Saturn was captured by the sun's plasma sheath, what they call the heliosphere, it all of a sudden the negative field of the sun's plasma sheath overcame Saturn's, and eventually Saturn became a planet within the solar system, and so it dimmed, so it was brighter before. And it was surrounded by this glowing plasma, and the Earth was surrounded by just warm, radiant cosmic energy, and so the entire planet, there were no seasons. Like everything was basically in a perpetual state of paradise. Sound familiar? The Garden of Eden. That was supposedly the ancient state of humankind. And that under this theory would make a lot of sense. If Earth was a moon of Saturn, then it was bathed in radiant energy, that tropical fruit would be growing all over the planet. And humans, like I eat a 95% vegan diet, and after experimenting with a lot of different things, it's clear to me that eating plants, like raw foods, is what's optimal for humankind. And so it's interesting that we adapted to eat meat, but we're designed to eat fruit and vegetables and seeds and nuts. And that's just a fact of biology. We're frugivores. Like, that's not to make any ethical claims or anything like that, but we're designed to eat fruit and seeds and nuts and stuff like that. So Saturn got captured. And again, when in the gravitational model of relativity, it doesn't make sense for a planet to be captured in this manner, because with gravity, it would just bend the space-time, and it would just it would bend its path, but then it would just continue off and out of the solar system. But understanding that these aren't just rocks in a space-time, blanket, whatever, but they're actually sphere magnets, and they have electrical charge. And so basically, just like magnets basically have their own attraction, so do the planets as part of an electric universe. And so, yeah, basically Saturn became a planet. It was captured by the sun. And so you had the sun, which itself is moving throughout the galaxy, right? And Saturn was captured and kind of was following in tow behind the sun, right? And then you had Mars and Earth in tow behind it. So from the Earth's perspective, Mars was above the North Pole. Saturn was above that as the great god, and we're enveloped in this. And basically the sun is behind that, but Saturn's still basically like what we see from the perspective of Earth. All right, and so going with the electric universe theory per Velikovsky, is that Venus may have been created as a ejection from Saturn, basically, and they have a lot of good material on the Thunderbolts Project channel about how that's possible, of the ejection of a rocky planet from a gas giant planet. But suffice to say, it appears that it is possible. We don't really know. We supposedly there's dense material at the core of the gas giant, and who knows? During electrical stress, it's possible that a piece of the rocky core could be ejected. That's again in the electric universe theory, the mechanism is there to explain that. With relativity, it's not, and so they just deny it and say it's categorically impossible. So Venus supposedly was ejected from Saturn and went through different phases, but suffice to say that Venus was associated mostly with beauty. All right, so let me just skip ahead a little bit here. Venus was Aphrodite. All right, so and Aphrodite in Greek, basically she was the goddess of beauty. All right, she was originally supposedly produced by Uranus's as she created from the sea foam produced by Uranus's genitals. Isn't that a nice visual? Which had been severed by Cronus. Cronus, again, is Saturn. Okay, so Saturn, almost what they're saying, if we're going with the narrative that basically the ancients were telling us what was happening in heavens in this mythological drama, Aphrodite was a moon of the gas giant planet Uranus, which had been severed by Saturn. So, the electric universe, they say Saturn, ejected Venus. According to this Wikipedia account of the Aphrodite, of Hesiod's theogony, it's possible that even Venus was a moon of Uranus and was captured by Saturn, when Saturn came into the solar system, possibly. In Homer's Iliad, she is, however, the daughter of Zeus, who again is Jupiter. And so, but these two origins are said to be hitherto separate entities. Basically, that they're both Venus, but there was first Aphrodite Urania, a heavenly, far out kind of wandering Aphrodite, and again, a wandering Venus out in the far reaches. So if Saturn, basically coming into the solar system, Uranus is out here, maybe already in the solar system, or maybe captured itself, but in the process of that interaction, a moon of Uranus is captured by Saturn, right? So Cronus comes in, severs Uranus's genitals, captures Aphrodite from the sea foam. But then at some point, she made a transfer and became a daughter of Zeus. So there was something that happened, and again, Zeus was Jupiter who came in and overthrew Cronus. He was the head of the Olympians. So, Jupiter came in and overthrew Saturn, is what they're telling us. And so, and then Aphrodite Pandemos is about the 5th century BC. She became common to all the people. So it's almost like Venus was a moon of Uranus, was captured by Saturn, and then at some point was captured by Jupiter. And so maybe that's why she just she gets around. And so anyway, she's released, or basically she becomes at some point that she transitions from the heavenly Aphrodite to the Aphrodite common to all the people. So in the electric universe, Venus becomes part of the lineup, so of the planets. So Venus, Mars, or Saturn, Mars, Venus, Earth. Okay, and this creates this plasma tail, this beautiful, crazy formation in the sky, and this is what basically they're recording all over the world, and this is the fundamental, this is part of the basis of the electric universe, is basically David Talbot went all over the world searching these petroglyphs and noticed this stick man, right, who is here, and basically Anthony Pratt, who's a plasma physicist, basically looks at those and like, that is, so here's his diagram of a plasma pinch, of basically a Birkeland current, just energy flowing, electric energy flowing throughout plasma. And it looks very much, basically this is the archetypal form of the stick man with the 2 dots. And so all over the world they were recording this figure, all right? And so that's very interesting why they were all recording that. And the theory is that basically this was the image in the sky of the plasma that was coming down in this chain link of planets. And it went through different transitions, and I highly encourage you to watch the Symbols of an Alien Sky documentary on their YouTube channel. It goes into all the detail of this, and it's really fascinating. But Suffice to say that basically the movements of the planets had profound impacts on Earth and its climate. Okay, so what Aphrodite, Venus came into the system. Venus is Lucifer. At some point, she was very nice. She was very nice at first. She's the goddess of love. Everything's beautiful. She basically moves uh, in a so so at some point, again, she transitioned from the offspring of Uranus. She became affiliated with Cronus, but then when Jupiter came into the picture, she became the daughter of Zeus. So it's almost like Jupiter came into the solar system as its own brown dwarf, right? It came into the system and started interrupting the gravitational, the pattern of the planets and their alignment, and it started to cause them to wobble a little bit. And this changed the plasma flow coming down to Earth, and it created all these different figures, which, when the Electric Universe guys, David Talbot, he compared all of the progression of the artwork all over the world, showed that basically it very well could be an image of what they were seeing in the sky, a world mountain and a rotating wheel on top. It was basically looking up towards the planets as they were aligned. It was creating this wheel effect. Saturn had this whole big wheel that lighting up, and even like the latest images that come back from Saturn, we can see actually there's light even at there's auroras, right? Let me see, Saturn aurora. Yeah, so basically these images are coming back and you can see the auroras. And we have these on Earth, right? And so the theory is these planets were in closer conjunction. These auroras, this charged plasma, this glowing charged plasma, was creating all these different figures and images in the sky. Okay, and this basically, created all this different artwork, this chain of artwork. And what happened is at some point Zeus came into the system, Jupiter comes into the system, overthrows the heavenly alignment of Cronus, of Saturn, and all of a sudden Venus starts to wobble in her orbit. And all of a sudden Venus, who is associated again with all the beauty and wonderfulness, she starts to become kind of a crazy bitch, for lack of a better term. She becomes Lucifer. Okay, she becomes the one who rebels against God, who is Saturn. All of a sudden, the heavenly alignment comes undone because Jupiter is basically, we're mixing, again, the Christian myth as it is today is very much a simpleton version of the myth. Originally, again, going back, you have to really delineate who the different entities represent. And Lucifer represents Venus. So Venus rebels against Saturn, and we're also documenting that at some point Venus ceases to be the affiliate of Saturn and becomes the affiliate of Zeus. So at some point Venus is ripped out of the alignment and goes to Zeus, goes to Jupiter. And when she starts to come back, she starts to begin this new orbit that, as all of a sudden the existing alignment is thrown out. And as she starts to establish her orbit, she makes these passes closer and farther to the Earth, right? Before it gets eventually settled out in the circular, peaceful orbit that we've been in, since that happened for the last several hundred years, probably more than 1,000, as I'm going to show. But basically, she started coming around and she started causing all kinds of problems for the people of planet Earth. So, about 5th century BC, Aphrodite ceases to become Aphrodite Urania. She becomes Aphrodite Pandemos, born of the union of Zeus. Okay, so she comes down. She's close to the Earth. She's as a moon before. She comes close to the Earth. Then she's captured by Zeus. But basically, then she becomes Lucifer essentially, and causes a lot of problems. The flood, right? If the Earth was enveloped within the plasma sheath of Saturn, and all of a sudden, there's this collapsing of that field, all of that water, basically, again, water is basically the combination of a hydrogen ion, a proton, and a hydroxide ion, right? Which, both of these can be created in the solar wind, but predominantly the hydroxide, negatively charged, comes from the bodies, the planets, and so the water is created in the merging of those fields. Again, you can create water, you can split water with electricity into hydrogen and oxygen. You can also create water, by a different process. And that's essentially what happens electrically in the atmosphere of comets, in the atmosphere of Earth, and the atmosphere of all planets that have a comprehensive enough magnetic field to collect and aggregate that energy. So the flood myth, all right, all over the world, the flood myth, the mandate of heaven, the natural order and will of the universe, the first card of the I Ching, basically also looks like the stick man. All right about, so China, going to China over in the east as an account of historical transitions over there. Imperial China begins about 200 BC. The Han Dynasty, basically, there's like this golden age, everything's really good. And then basically in AD 9, the usurper Wang Mang claimed that the mandate of heaven called for the end of the Han Dynasty. And the mandate of heaven was very much like, the order and will of the universe. Again, it was Tian, it was the plasma balance in the sky. And all of a sudden around, the supposed time of, Christ, basically, this figure starts to wobble, so to speak. The mandate of heaven starts to shift, okay? And all of a sudden you have lots of warfare and fighting and the breakdown of the empire and splitting and, basically hardship and, climate shifts. And then this is for several hundred years in the 1st century AD. And then basically at some point after that, all of a sudden things get good again. So, coming in like, 7, 800, 900, the high point of Imperial China, everything starts getting good again. But there's several hundred years where things were very much like a lot of warfare, and it was originally the mandate of heaven was lost. There were climate shifts, and it was associated with the changing of the plasma in the sky, the changing of the alignment of the planets. All right, and so that's Chinese history. Then we go over to South America and Central America with the Maya. Okay, and for those who are a fan of the George Lucas series, there's actually Star Wars existed in the Maya culture, and these were a series of wars. And let me show you the dates: 500, 600, basically the same set of centuries or similar set of centuries when wars were waged in the Maya kingdoms against each other, and it was very much associated with the planet Venus. Okay, I've noted the date and recorded. So they had wars correlating with the movement of Venus. These guys, Wikipedia, they're like, oh, first visible in the morning or first visible at night. Yeah, like, oh, there's a bright star in the sky. Let's go, kill our neighbors. Like, no, obviously there was something more going on. Venus was causing catastrophe. Venus was known to Mesoamerican civilizations as the bringer of war. Okay. In contrast to European assigning that characteristic to Mars. So yeah, the Maya basically waged war against each other during these times of conflict, and they were very much associated with Venus, but they were also sometimes associated with retrograde periods of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Okay, so the throwing off of the heavenly alignment caused warfare all over the world, is what it's looking like. So that's the Maya. So now we've got the East, we've got the West, and the fall of the Roman Empire here in the Central Europe world, right? They spread their military super wide. It was this huge Mediterranean, empire. There were so many different people. There was no such thing as a Roman anymore because it was just so many different factions, kind of like America today. There's no such thing as an American anymore. There's just different factions, and that's why we're in kind of a de facto state of, civil war in certain sense, with now people like trying to justify the shooting of congressmen. It's really crazy, but again, climate changes and shifts in the governmental structure are very much associated, basically. And my, contention, the electric universe contention, is not that climate change isn't happening, but that it's governed by things throughout the solar system. And carbon dioxide, at very, very most, is just a tiny, tiny variable without any sort of leading major important indicator status for the general course of the climate. That it's actually things between the planets and the sun that causes basically these climate shifts. And so the fall of the Roman Empire, led to the Dark Ages, which basically, again, so we're looking, yeah, basically, so and all of a sudden the empire declined, right? As I was saying in my last series of videos about Zionism and Islam, basically the Roman Empire did not actually collapse, it just devolved. The Catholic Church became the new Roman Empire, the Pope became the spiritual emperor of the planet, and devolved his temporal power to all the different operating governments and royal dynasties, and that's pretty much the same state of affairs today, or at least for most of the countries. And the ones you don't, that's where you get the axis of evil and such things. So yeah, the in Middle Ages it was harder to grow food. Like what was it? Monty Python. There's some lovely filth over here, Dennis. Like it was a lot harder, and it was a lot of warfare, like straight Game of Thrones status. And again, the winter is coming, right? It was very much associated with these climate shifts and the affection of food production. And so going with the theory that basically Aphrodite is Venus, Jupiter comes into the system, starts throwing everything off. Aphrodite becomes the daughter of Zeus, essentially, and this is where Aphrodite, what originally Lucifer as Venus, becomes basically rebels against the heavenly order and then causes all these problems on the planet. All right, and that causes a lot of warfare all over the planet because basically there's these huge storms and earthquakes and all sorts of stuff. So fall of the Roman Empire, Dark Ages, Aphrodite. So now basically Venus settles into this pattern, and from Earth, this is the pattern that Venus makes in the sky. All right, is this the original pentagram, the pentagram of Venus? All right, and that's the pentagram that you see, the hard angle pentagram, but this is the natural pentagram of nature and of the cosmos. And that's the signature that Venus is imprinting on Earth. All right, that's the signal that she is basically imprinting on Earth. And so this is interesting. Successive inferior conjunctions of Venus repeat at an orbital resonance of approximately 13/8. That is, Venus orbits the Sun approximately 13 times for every 8 orbits of Earth. And so 13/8, that's interesting. What does that equal? 1.625. Very, very interesting because, of course, approximately means that that's not exactly it. And 1.625 is very close to the phi ratio, 1.618, all right? And, I just put out a video. My last video was a poem about the Fibonacci sequence, the phi ratio. People have heard of this, but they don't quite understand a lot of times what its real significance is. The phi ratio is in everything. It's the proportions of the human body, the proportions of many other animals, plants, DNA, the solar system, art and architecture, music, population growth, the stock market, the Bible, and in theology. And basically it is the spiral pattern that causes growth and development. So, all right, you have basically the association. Basically, Venus is imprinting this spiral on the planet, and it's in everything, and it's very much beautiful. It's beautiful to our eyes, right? And beauty is like an objective product of the universe, and why they say that people have beautiful souls, have beautiful faces, because when you're actually resonating with the cosmic signal, basically everything is naturally beautiful. Everything looks beautiful from far away, as the Postal Service say. And that's a very powerful perspective to understand that the more that you're in alignment with the signal from the universe, that you will be beautiful. And again, that's inner beauty. And yeah, to just go off with that again, it's Aphrodite. She's the god of all this stuff. So Aphrodite, is beautiful, is imposing this is a signal of beauty on the planet. She's resonating with the phi ratio. And of course, the phi ratio, Venus is not throughout all the different galaxies, right? But they're all spirals. So it's almost like Venus is actually a resonator with the phi ratio signal that is emanating throughout the universe. So Venus is almost like a moon that's kind of imprinting that signal on Earth. And it's interesting because Aphrodite Urania, the first Aphrodite, was very much associated with an era when homosexuality was more of a thing, that the difference between genders was not as accentuated. And then when she became Aphrodite Pandemos, all right, she inspired the love for all, she inspired all love for women. So all of a sudden she's affiliated with growth and development, right? This new Aphrodite Pandemos, she's very much imprinting this pattern of beauty, of the phi ratio, and of growth and development. And all of a sudden, it inspires the love for all women. So all of a sudden, the differences between the genders start to accentuate. There's more growth, if you will. And the life force increases. And the life force is very much the sexual energy. The sexual energy is how life, propagates itself. Basically is the positive and the negative. So Venus starts to wobble out of kind of her orbit and causes basically Earth to start all of a sudden having seasons a little bit, and so all of a sudden positive and negative are starting to be accentuated, and all of a sudden women have more voluptuous features, and men are like getting more muscular, and basically this is again why we have these statues, and they're all basically like accentuating the human form. I mean, if you look back to the old statues, like people were shorter, like they were more like dwarves, and again, like J.R.R. Tolkien, he knows a lot of this stuff by studying the ancient myth, and Lord of the Rings is basically an allegory, replication of the heavenly cycles that he perceived by studying the myths. And so very, very interesting. Aphrodite shifts. The planets start to get wobbled out of place, but seasons start to happen on the planet, and the differences between the genders start to be accentuated. So basically, this is very much associated with Lucifer. Okay, the knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of plus and minus. All of a sudden, Adam and Eve start copulating. Basically, they start playing with their sexual energy, the orgone energy. All right. All of a sudden, the order of heaven is thrown off. Venus is the first to initiate it from the perspective of Earth, basically. And so what it later gets categorized as Lucifer, as in the one who rebels against God, who is El. All right. And then basically we're like, burned. We're like so mad at the fact that we had everything so good. There was food all over the planet. We didn't have to work. We didn't have to do anything. We just hang out and party all the time. And then all of a sudden the planets fall out of their alignment, led by Venus, aka Lucifer, a rebellion in the heavens against God, who is Saturn. All right. Then basically that's what leads to this whole judgment of the planet. Okay, everyone was sin. Everyone was having homosex and like just having parties, and like God just So we start taking it personally. All right, the solar system gets thrown out of alignment, and we start taking it personally that God has judged us because of the sinful state of mankind. All right, and so all of a sudden Venus plays this massive part in this transition. The mandate of heaven is lost. There's warfare all over the world. All right, the plasma, the mandate of heaven, the plasma coming down to the planet, signified by the stick man, no longer is coming down to the planet. So again, the mandate of heaven is lost. There's no more plasma coming down to Earth in the alignment of the planets. Wars break out, and the climate of the planet shifts majorly. We go into the Dark Ages. The Catholic Church knows what's going on. They take control of all the information, and then basically they establish the universities, they establish the government structures, they establish the media chains, and basically they establish a chokehold on information on planet Earth, right? And it's interesting because one of the places on planet Earth that was keeping the records and was retaining the original knowledge of the meaning of the words, the meaning of the myths, while everybody else went into this, like infantile state of regression because they couldn't, again, when you have to focus on survival, when you have to find food, you're not worried about philosophy, you're not worried about higher thinking. So the Dark Ages was a result of climate shifts. All right, and all of a sudden, but in Ireland was the place in the British Isles. That was where the monks in Ireland were transcribing the ancient documents, and the church at Tara was standing in contravention to the Church of Rome, which is why when the second city of London, Babylon, was established, their first priority, as at every opportunity they could get, was to take over Ireland, was to destroy the Celtic monarchy lines. All right, and that's basically, the McCarthy clan was one of those royal lines, and lots of others, and basically, there were they were exterminated, they were invaded, and their anarcho-capitalist legal system essentially was replaced by English common law, which was feudalism, which was the lord is the king and the lord rules you and he owns the land. All right, so basically the climate was shifted out, basically, and it was all led by Venus, aka Lucifer. We're pissed off that we don't get to be in paradise anymore, and we start this whole narrative that God judged us and we're evil and we're sinful and we have to be ashamed of the phi ratio of sexual energy, of copulation and communion, because it's that's what led us into this whole thing to begin with, right? So like that it was because Venus was leading us to just be a bunch of degenerates, that all of a sudden we were judged by God and thrown out. So basically that's my presentation to the class today. That's, I hope that this people find this a little interesting. I'm going to put some links down below, but suffice to say that I think this is really the story that we should be focusing on, because if everything's a distraction, right? If there's fake news, why is there fake news? It's because there's real news out there and they don't want us focusing on it. So I think this is the story of planet Earth. I think that the confusion that relativistic astrophysicists and astronomers express with each new development as our observational capacity expands throughout the universe, the bafflement and confusion that these guys demonstrate implies that there is room for competing theories. And the electric universe guys really, really, really have me convinced. Again, science is about, letting the theories battle against each other and comparing that against the data, but comparing it against the data with regard to comets, with regard to explaining the petroglyphs throughout the planet, throughout basically the entire deep universe, the deep space, all right? These flows of energy throughout the universe, nebula, galaxies aligned on similar ecliptics, which shouldn't exist in a gravitational thing. This flows of energy like mushrooms, mycelium in the soil, right? There's flows of plasma throughout the universe. The cosmic microwave background radiation shows these tendrils, like roots rolling throughout the universe. And these stars are basically fed by plasma flowing out the universe. There's this signal emanating through everything, and life is a principle of the universe. There is probably life on most habitable planets throughout the solar system and the entire galaxy and in every other galaxy, because it's the phi ratio. And the reason that Earth is so resonant with life is because we have several different factors, for whatever reason, that make life very, very habitable. And that involves, now we have the moon, but we had, Saturn, and we had Venus, and basically all these modulating influences, and also resonating influences to basically establish life on Earth, very much as like, Dagobah, where Yoda lives, like the jungle planet. And so that's it. I hope you guys gained something from this. Let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments below. And basically that's it. Who is Lucifer? Lucifer is the planet Venus, who rebelled against Saturn and was cast out of the heavenly alignment when Jupiter came to town. And if we want to know what's coming next in the solar system drama, we should be focusing on what the sun is doing and how the planets are reacting. And for that, I defer to the links down below. You guys, wholeness and balance. I hope you have a great day and a great week. Cheers.
Ah.